Sean Durkin, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Kick in the Seat podcast to talk about The Nest, one of my very favorite films of the year, which is coming out now on video on demand. It had a brief theatrical run, I believe, a month or two ago, and now we're being treated to seeing it in our homes, which I guess is fitting because this is very much a domestic story. So welcome. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Doing
Well,
good.
um, I wanted to start off by talking about the 9 year gap between your debut film and the thing that put you really on the map, Martha Marcy May Marlene. I believe I got that title right,
Yeah.
from 2011, and now we've got The Nest coming out in 2020. So, what have you been doing for the last almost decade, creatively or just in the film industry?
Yeah. Well, first I went to England and made this mini series called Southcliffe, which was a big four-part series that I directed. Tony Grisoni wrote. And yeah, that was a big undertaking, both physically as a shoot and also emotionally. It's about a spree killing. Um, and and then after that, I produced a lot of films, I think five films, and also writing, both The Nest and a couple of other things, and um, had a couple of films that I was working on that got very close to going and fell through for very different reasons. And then sort of all through that, The Nest was, I was just like, yeah, writing The Nest, and it's funny, the actual writing of The Nest and making of The Nest was not so long. I mean, I think it was about 3 years of actual writing until we got financing to make it, and then only about a year between sort of that moment and actually finishing the shoot. So the actual making of The Nest was not, that long in comparison to other things. But it was more the other projects around that didn't happen that sort of took me off, for a year here and a year there that didn't pan out.
So was The Nest, I mean, it took you 3 years to work on it. Was that the project that you really wanted to go after, or was just the one that sort of didn't fall through?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's my most personal thing, and the one, the one project where I was actually developing it with my own producer and something that was, yeah, just much closer to me. And with the other projects were, some were the studio, other producers involved, different things. So there were all these sort of external components that I didn't have on The Nest, and The Nest was the sort of closest one to me. So now that I've made it, I can't imagine anything else being my second feature. I mean, um, but I didn't expect it to be for a long time until I sort of realized it was ready, and we went ahead with it.
Now, I'm just curious about this transition because you had a film that was, very critically successful. And I think this was the first time I had really discovered Elizabeth Olsen. So, kudos
Yeah, it's
there.
our
Um,
first movie.
right. Well, so after that, following that up by going to England to film a four-part miniseries, what was the decision there? Was that the first thing that you were sort of offered? Did you want to take a shot at something different that was still filmmaking, but not, traditional feature?
Yeah, so at the time, it was a lot of factors. I was just looking for great writing. I mean, it's that simple. Film, TV, whatever it is, I just want great writing to work with. And so I got sent a lot of stuff, and this was the thing that was just undeniably brilliant in my opinion, the scripts. And then Tony Grisoni, who wrote it, I had been a fan of for so long, and had previously seen the Red Riding trilogy. And I think before I even made a film, I saw that and I was like, this is what I want to do. And so those two things coming together, and also I spent my childhood in England, and so I really had wanted to go back there. I hadn't been back in 20 years, and so that was also a big factor. And um, it didn't feel any different than doing a film. We shot it in 52 days, not broken up by episode. I mean, it's basically, you could argue it's a 3-hour film broken into 4 chapters. And so and the way the network worked over there at the time, it was just only 2 people. So it wasn't the same as making television here now. It felt very different. And the other thing that was appealing was that I was quite burnt out on, you know, I'd spent a long time promoting the movie and, the award circuit stuff, and felt a bit burnt out. And so the thought of going and making something where it was just about the work and it would air and that would be that was also really exciting to me, because at the end of the day, it's really just about the work and doing good work for me.
Cool. Now, had film always been your ambition? Because Martha Marcy May Marlene was, you were a bit older when that came out. You weren't like the 20-year-old wunderkind or something. It feels like you'd been, a bit more seasoned, but not necessarily in film, because that was your first feature. What had you done in your life creatively leading up to making that film?
Yeah, it's I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was probably 8 years old or 9 years old. The problem was saying that out loud.
Mm.
It was very difficult for me to say out loud, and so it was almost like a not quite a secret, but it felt like a pipe dream. And so I wrote short fiction. In high school, I started to get into photography, and in college, I really got into those two things, and then started taking film classes, and then I transferred and went to NYU, and so it slowly happened. But even when I first got to NYU, I thought I was going to be a cinematographer, and so it happened gradually. But really, it was at NYU where I was shooting films, and then I started a company and I started producing before I even understood what that meant. We just kind of made it up as we went along. I mean, when we produced After School, which was Antonio Campos's first feature, and I mean, we just had no idea what we were doing. We just did it. We just made it up, and that and so I got to work on films in all different capacities, and sort of learn and see things and learn from people around me who were doing it. And I had great mentors. But yeah, it really started with a love of writing, I think, and storytelling, and then falling in love with photography, and naturally merging those two things.
I love what you said about, wanting to be a filmmaker was sort of a dream, but it didn't start to manifest really until you said it out loud. It strikes me that Jude Law's character in The Nest, Rory, feels very much like someone who, I don't know if it's that he had a dream that he never articulated, or if something had been switched in his soul, because it seems his ultimate ambition in life was to be successful and make money, which in a lot of cases, if you realize your dreams, that's sort of a benefit of that, but it sort of became his obsession without any kind of creative life inside of him. Now, you said this is your most personal film. Is there anything in the Rory character, or even Carrie Coon's character, Allison, that you felt you were trying to exercise out, or, work out on screen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with those characters, I'm certainly in them in certain places, the way that any writer, I think all writers are in all of their characters. But with those two, it's a lot of observing people, particularly that generation and that era, and wanting to look at where they got their values, why they have this ambition, where it comes from, who it really belongs to. I'm really fascinated by who do our ideas really belong to? Were they told to us at a certain age? Did we believe them because of where we went to school or what society we grew up in? And questioning at a certain point what's really driving us. And so I'm really fascinated with that, and sort of didn't really realize that that's also at the core of Martha. I didn't so clearly draw those comparisons until really I was editing The Nest.
Now, you grew up partially in Surrey, which is where the bulk of the film takes place. Did you have your characters relocate from America back there as Rory's hometown simply because that's where you grew up, or was there a special connection to Surrey that you wanted to explore? Like this, it's specific. This had to be the location, or was it just because they had these great estates, these spooky estates that you could that you could rent out?
Yeah, it was more. It was less specific and to me, and more of sort of grounding in it. That's just happens to be where a lot of people who commute and work in that field would live. It's and it was just the one I knew, so it's sort of how it made it into the script. And we didn't actually end up shooting in Surrey, but there's a feel there, and to that life, to that commuter. We did a lot of research about that, 1980s commuter commodities trader life, and we knew my production designer was so amazing and so knowledgeable about architecture, and he knew what the house that Rory like should have had that would be believable and in his price range for what he's making, and so we knew we would see houses and he'd be like, no, this is just what a broker would have, and a successful one, it's not enough. So we'd have to go one up on that to find the house we found. But then you couldn't go too far because we actually saw some like small castles, and that would just be ridiculous. I mean, we went to see one, there was an actual moat and a drawbridge, and we were just like, no, I mean, that's too far. So it was just about finding that realm of like, what is that mindset? Like, what is his ambition? And the house had to embody that ambition without going so far it's complete madness, but just sort of mad enough.
Now, you talked about understanding and researching the values of the time period, and it seemed that Rory is, and not to give too much away here, but as unsuccessful as he is in some of his business ventures, he did seem very prescient. And there is a part of the script that feels like it was written from a 2020 perspective, looking back on the seeds of what was planted in the 1980s. Is that something that came about in your research? Did you talk to people who kind of saw these different waves coming and you incorporated that into your character, but giving a little bit of a twist?
Yeah. I did a lot of research, and then had a few people who had sort of show drafts to, knowing, and knowing they'd sort of like tear apart, and I really worked hard to get to those very, very specific details. That there's things in the background of the movie that are very specific exactly to the dates, of when something's on TV in the background, it's exactly the day that it aired, and really fixating on those things. And also I wanted Rory to have real vision. Like I wanted him to be a character who did have great ideas and did have charisma and did have potential. He's just, was a kid who never learned to do his homework. And so, yeah, you get the luxury of writing in 2020 with the information you have, but the things that he pitches were innovative things happening at the time. And so I wanted to position him as someone who, was thinking ahead in a lot of ways, but didn't know necessarily how to do it, and was always thinking big instead of thinking about getting his footing.
The other component that really struck me here, and I saw a little bit of it in Martha, was an affinity for the horror genre. You can call them tropes, but signature kind of elements, either camera work or score. But these aren't horror movies, even though horrific kind of personal things happen in them. Is that a conscious aesthetic that you apply to these dramas to kind of heighten the feelings you want to evoke in the audience, or am I just seeing a bunch of coincidences?
No, absolutely. Very, very calculated choice, in the sense that ultimately what I'm interested in is character and character drama. But I also, the films that form me are, the sort of best elevated genre films. And so, with Martha, it was, okay, but first and foremost, I want to depict a truthful depiction of what it is like and what the psychological experience is like for a woman to escape a cult, and what those first 3 weeks after you escape are. And so when I talked to people about that and researched it, people who had survived, what they described to me was living in a thriller. I mean, it was, one woman told me she thought she saw him everywhere, the cult leader. She so that, you know, I could take thriller language from cinema and put it onto that and have it be true to the emotional experience of the film and the character. And the same here, where it's about a family moving and what the move does to sort of unearth the truths operating beneath this cycle that they have. And moving into this house and feeling the isolation of it creates the same sort of outcome as a haunting does. It leads to distrust. It leads to, you know, not as far as psychosis, but it starts to wear on Allison in this way, where she starts to doubt things and not trust her family. And so there's an unraveling in a sense that is reminiscent of a haunting and horror. And so I wanted to, yeah, use the language of a haunting because the family is haunted sort of by itself and by its own secrets.
Yeah, this thought crossed my mind while I was watching it. It's like The Shining without ghosts, and I mean that as a compliment, and minus the bloody ending. But my last question is actually about the musical choices, because the soundtrack, I really picked up on some kind of on the nose motifs that you had going on here. For example, Allison is driving after having had an argument with Rory about his dreams and ambitions, and Heart's These Dreams comes on the radio. There's a few of these, there's a handful of these throughout the film. And I just wondered, are you just playing with us, trying to see who's going to pick up on these clues or what?
No, that one was simply, I just, with cues like that, for me, it's about like a feeling that it creates. So I would never, you know, I would never want to have the literal lyrics mean something. It's just like the tone of that song, and it's also personal in the way it kind of takes me back. Like, so some of the songs just ground me in this like place in my memory, you know, like the Simply Red song that plays in the restaurant scene, you know, that takes me to a specific place of like falling asleep in the back of my dad's car, you know, when I was a kid. And there's so there are these sort of like sensorial journeys that they take me on, and I think that that's what sort of gets me into writing and grounds me in a script. And so those songs become important without being, you know, too literal, I guess. And then there's moments like when Sam is recording, you know, the tape off the radio, and you know, those are very personal things for me, and details that I love. So it's always grounded in more of a feeling than it is of a specific lyric.
Cool. Well, I responded to it. I got a lot of that meaning out of listening to those songs. I'm thinking, this is on the nose, but damn it, it's also the perfect song for this moment. So, so congratulations, and congratulations on the movie. I thought it was really spectacular. And whatever you end up doing next, you know, I hope it gets off the ground for you soon, and then you have success getting it getting out to people, because if this is any indication, your next one's just going to be like bonkers cool as well. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to talk to me, and yeah, best of luck, man.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Yeah, take care.